Today, we're looking at something really fascinating, Byron Katie's mystical experience. She details it in her book, A Mind at Home with Itself,
Right.
but we're adding another layer. We're going to look at it through the lens of Theosophy, particularly the teachings of H.P. Blavatsky. So Katie's personal account and Blavatsky's framework.
Okay, interesting combination. So our mission here is to kind of map Katie's experience onto these theosophical concepts, see how they illuminate each other.
That's the idea, to see the spiritual, maybe even cosmological depths.
I'm definitely curious. Mystical experiences.
Yeah.
What are they really? Do they connect to something bigger? Can we even decode them using these philosophical systems? That's what I'm hoping we can explore. Okay, let's jump in. Where does Katie's account start?
Well, it begins quite dramatically. She describes waking up and seeing this figure, my lady, sitting beside her bed.
My lady.
Yes. And the feeling she gets is profound, gentle kindness, a trustworthiness she'd never felt before. And then almost instantly, she becomes the lady. Like she finds herself as this figure with no memory of ever having been Katie.
Wow. Okay, that's intense. Absolutely benign. Trust I had never felt before. You can see why it was so powerful. So she is the lady now. How would Theosophy interpret that, this lady?
Well, from a theosophical viewpoint, my lady looks very much like a manifestation of Katie's own higher self.
Her higher self, like the
Right.
divine part of her.
Exactly. The divine, immortal, observing consciousness within. In Blavatsky's terms, you could think of it as higher manas, the spiritual mind, the bit that reincarnates. Or maybe even Buddhi manas, the spiritual soul connected to that mind. It's the pure witness.
The divine witness. I like that. And that feeling of absolute trust she mentioned.
It makes perfect sense if you consider what this principle is. It's often called the God within. Not, an old man in the sky, but the inherent divinity in us, that core essence is trustworthy.
Okay, so she merges. She becomes the lady. What does that signify, the merging itself?
That sudden shift, forgetting Katie, becoming the lady, it suggests her everyday consciousness, her sense of self, just temporarily dissolved, unified completely with this higher aspect.
Yeah, complete unification.
Yeah, the illusion of the separate self just
Right.
fell away for a moment. So she's perceiving from the viewpoint of her eternal self. That transcendence of the ego is pretty central to advanced spiritual states in many traditions.
Mind-bending stuff. But then she says the lady was the observer, right?
Right.
And that while she was as the lady, she wasn't physically on the chair. She was without form and everywhere. So the perspective shifts again.
It does, and that's key, the observer part. That points straight to the higher ego, the enduring spiritual self. And the move from a seeming form, the lady on the chair, to being without form everywhere, that's really significant.
How so?
Theosophy teaches that the higher self can project an illusionary form, a Mayavi Rupa. Maybe that was the initial lady. But its actual essence. It's described as shapeless, sexless, formless. It is a state of consciousness, a breath.
A state of consciousness, a breath. That's powerful imagery.
Yeah.
And being everywhere.
That feeling points to the sheer expansiveness of our higher principles. Maybe Atma Buddhi, pure spirit and the spiritual soul, or even something called the auric envelope, the Harani-garbha.
The organ book.
Yeah, think of it like your spiritual blueprint. It holds your potential, your karma, but it also
Right.
reflects the whole universe. Blavatsky calls it the container of our cosmic individuality, mirroring the universe itself. So everywhere makes sense from that level.
Wow. Okay, so from the state of being a formless, everywhere observer, she then goes to the school. She says it felt like shooting straight up into another dimension. What's the take on that journey?
While shooting up into another dimension sounds very much like a rapid ascent of consciousness to higher planes of existence.
Higher planes.
Theosophy maps out multiple levels of reality, multiple planes, all interpenetrating, each with its corresponding state of consciousness. Her experience suggests moving way beyond the physical, even beyond the lower astral into much subtler realms, macrocosmic states, maybe?
So like moving up through different levels of reality.
Kind of, yeah. It could be like entering a state of samadhi, that deep spiritual trance where consciousness goes beyond the physical senses, beyond the brain, perceiving directly. Blavatsky also wrote about ancient theurgists achieving ecstasy or illumination through something called manteya, a sort of divine communion.
And she specifically said she shot out of head. Any symbolic meaning there?
Symbolically, leaving the head suggests moving beyond ordinary brain-bound thinking. Maybe it implies activating higher spiritual centers like the pineal gland. Theosophy calls it the divine eye, the organ for spiritual intuition.
The third eye.
Could be. Or perhaps it represents spiritual energy rising up the sushumna, the central channel.
Fascinating. Okay, next comes this incredible vision of creation. She felt she saw all physical creation as all numbers, each with its own color and sound, moving out and then returning to zero. That sounds fundamental.
It really does, and it connects incredibly well with core theosophical ideas. Blavatsky constantly emphasizes number as the basis of everything. She wrote things like, number underlies form and number guides sound. And number lies at the root of the manifested universe.
So Katie, seeing everything as number.
It's a direct perception of that principle, numbers setting the pattern, the limits for nature.
And numbers having colors and sounds. That's like synesthesia on a cosmic scale.
Exactly. Theosophy teaches they aren't separate. Number, sound, color, they're all aspects of the one creative vibration coming from the primordial source, the white glory. From that come the 7 colors, and each has a corresponding sound, making up the musical scale.
So her vision is like seeing that happen?
It seems so, seeing numbers with their colors and sounds. Esoteric science says every sound in visible world awakens corresponding sound in invisible. Every sound corresponds to color, number. The number of vibrations matches. It's the eternal music of spheres.
Incredible. And the movement. Out and then back to zero.
That cyclical pattern perfectly mirrors the theosophical concept of cosmic cycles. Manvantara, the period of creation and activity, and pralaya, the period of dissolution and rest.
So out is creation, back is dissolution.
Right. And zero or nothing, that's the absolute. T-A-T, the unconditioned state before anything manifests, where everything returns. Her feeling that everything happening all at once also fits seeing it from a timeless, noumenal plane where our linear time just doesn't apply.
This is really starting to build a picture.
Right.
Okay, after that cosmic vision, she has this realization that it all added up to nothing, that it was prior to zero, that none of it was real. Even deep knowledge didn't matter. That sounds pretty radical.
You can sound that way initially, yes. But in Theosophy, this points directly to the doctrine of Maya, illusion.
So it's all just an illusion, like fake.
Not exactly fake, but impermanent, relative, not the ultimate unchanging reality. Blavatsky said the objective universe is a passing illusion. Forms come and go.
Okay. And the feeling I was nothing.
That's seeing the personal ego, the everyday sense of I tied to desires, and the body as part of Maya, too. It's a temporary vehicle, not the real, eternal self.
So when she says none of it was real, she means from the perspective of?
From the perspective of the absolute pure spirit, compared to that, all manifested existence is like shadows. And prior to zero, that takes it even further, to the unmanifested Parabrahman, beyond all qualities. Literally no thing, but the potential for everything.
And the bit about knowledge having no meaning? That's tough.
From that ultimate standpoint, yeah. All knowledge about things, even dear esoteric knowledge about the planes, it's still secondary. Relative. True knowledge, in this view, isn't about something. It is something. It's direct experience, being one with spirit. You can only really grasp the absolute through the region of the higher mind, as Blavatsky put it. Katie seems to have had a glimpse beyond concepts.
Right. Okay. So after these immense insights, the experience shifts again quite dramatically. She enters total darkness, feels completely alienated, terrified, trapped forever, almost. That's quite a swing.
It's a very intense shift, absolutely. Theosophically, this sounds like an encounter with an extremely high abstract spiritual level. Perhaps the great spatial void, primordial akasa, undifferentiated spirit matter, or maybe the silence or darkness of the unmanifested logos before creation stirs.
A void. That sounds terrifying.
To the personality, yes. To a consciousness still attached to form, to individuality, encountering absolute formlessness, timelessness, impersonality, it can feel like annihilation, like total isolation. There are concepts like Atala, a primordial state, or the one dark truth that hint at this ultimate unmanifest source that's beyond our comprehension. The terror is the personality's reaction to facing dissolution, basically.
But it didn't last, right? She asked herself, can I really know that this is true? And that questioning changed everything. The darkness became friendly.
Yes, that inquiry was crucial, and it's a fantastic illustration of the power of manas, the mind principle, in Theosophy. The seat of reason, self-awareness, discernment. Even in these incredibly profound, overwhelming states, the ability to question, to inquire into your own experience and beliefs. Can I really know this? That can lead to understanding and freedom from fear. It shows that even in the face of the seemingly unknowable, the mind, when used rightly, can be a tool for liberation. Her overcoming that terror through a simple question is really quite profound.
It really is.
Okay.
So after the darkness comes integration. She describes returning to a familiar perspective, woman sitting on chair, but now seeing it as paradise, feeling the freedom of having no body.
Exactly. Bringing that transcendental insight back into everyday life, that's key. Seeing the mundane as paradise means the veils of Maya, of illusion, have thinned for her. The inherent divinity is shining through ordinary reality. Blavatsky suggested it's possible to live beyond the material even while in a body by identifying with the true self.
And the freedom of having no body.
That sounds like disidentifying from the physical form, the stula sharira, becoming aware of the higher formless aspects, the higher self again, which is inherently shapeless, formless.
Then she shifts back to the lady's viewpoint, the observer, and looking at Katie woman and the man on the bed. She sees them as primitive, sees animal in their eyes, the density, the ignorance. That's a very different perspective from oneness.
It's a stark contrast, isn't it? And it highlights the difference between the enlightened perspective of the higher self and the ordinary unenlightened personality. Density, ignorance, the animal aspect, theosophically, that points to the dominance of what's called the lower quaternary,
Lower choir man.
the four lower principles:
Mm-hmm.
physical body, ashkal double, or linga sharira, life force, prana, and kama, the desire principle, earthly attachments, animal soul. When these aren't guided or illuminated by the higher principles, by higher manas and buddhi, then yeah, we can seem quite primitive, driven by instinct and separateness.
And she says very clearly, the woman on the bed was not enlightened. The only enlightened part of her was sitting on the chair as the observer.
Which is just a perfect match for the theosophical view. The higher manas, or buddhi manas, is the enlightened witness, separate from the personality caught up in its dramas.
And she saw that they didn't have to suffer, that their suffering came from believing they were victims, believing they were separate. Another key idea.
Absolutely central. That perception ties directly into the concept of the nidanas, the chain of causation leading to suffering, the root cause. Avidya, ignorance. Ignorance of our true nature, of reality. Believing we're separate, isolated egos, that's ahankara. The I sense is the core illusion that breeds suffering, according to Theosophy.
But even seeing the suffering, the density, she also perceived their innocence. How does that fit?
That's crucial too. It reflects the teaching that deep down at our core, the spiritual self Atma Buddhi is eternally pure. It's an untainted spark of the divine. The suffering, the mistakes, they belong to the personality navigating the world of Maya. Blavatsky was clear. The higher ego's inner essence is unsoilable.
Wow. Okay. And finally, the whole experience culminates in total compassion and a vast love, a love coming from beyond suffering, so intense it felt like it would overwhelm her personality. This feels like the absolute peak.
It certainly sounds like it. This state of total compassion, this vast love that transcends personal suffering. It aligns beautifully with what Theosophy calls Buddhic consciousness. Buddhi, the spiritual soul. It's the vehicle for Atma, the universal spirit, and it's seen as the source of universal love, deep spiritual understanding, and that divine compassion.
Did that kind of love something achievable for us?
The potential is absolutely within everyone. Cultivating unselfish, universal love of humanity, as Blavatsky stressed, is fundamental to the path. Think of the ideal of the Buddha of compassion choosing to help others rather than just seeking personal liberation. Katie's experience seems to touch that same quality.
And the intensity. Why would it overwhelm the personality?
Well, there's a vast difference in vibration, you could say, between those refined spiritual states and our everyday consciousness. Our lower vehicles, physical, emotional, mental, cellular, they often need purification, strengthening, to handle that kind of divine energy without being overloaded. Developing virtues like karuna, compassion, is part of preparing the vessel.
Incredible. What a journey.
Yeah.
We've really traced Katie's experience step by step and seen how these theosophical concepts just light it up. From My Lady is the higher self, the ascent to higher planes, the vision of creation matching number, sound, color.
Right, and the insight into Maya, the nothingness, the confrontation with the void, the power of inquiry, and finally that culmination in Buddhic compassion and love. Yeah. It's remarkably coherent when viewed together.
It really is.
Yeah.
It feels like we've unpacked a lot about reality, consciousness, the self, hopefully sparking some real insights for you, the listener.
Yes, hopefully some aha moments along the way.
Definitely. So, maybe a final thought to leave you with. How might this idea of a divine observer within you relate to your own life? Have you ever had moments of feeling detached watching yourself? Or moments where a deeper understanding just seemed to surface?
Could that be a hint of your own higher self making itself known?
Worth pondering. And maybe this has sparked your interest to explore some of these ideas further Maya, the higher self, the nature of consciousness itself.
There's certainly a huge amount to explore there. Katie's story, through this theosophical lens, is a really compelling doorway into it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's given you plenty to think about.